All right. Hi, and welcome to From Many People's Strength, the podcast where we cover Saskatchewan politics and current events. My name is Cory, and my pronouns are he and him.
And my name is David. My pronouns are they and them. I'm okay with he and him as well.
My name's Sarah. My pronouns are she and her.
And for people who have listened before or watched before, you might notice we have a new guest, new co-host. I was going to say guest host, but we're hoping that you can stay on for a while.
Gonna try my best, yeah.
So I guess, who are you, Sarah?
I am born and raised here in Regina. I'm a scientist, a mother. I work in safety. I'm just kind of getting new into politics, but feeling a lot of passion towards making the future better for myself and my daughter and the next generation. So I'm trying to dig in as best I can.
Good stuff. Well, and with that, I guess we might as well jump into our stories because we got a couple to cover. Regina City Councillor Terina Shaw, two-faced possible reprimands over comment toward colleague. This has already gone through City Council kind of stuff. It's been sort of dealt with in whatever way it could. This complaint was filed by Councillor Stevens because in an interaction in a I guess casual meeting or whatever, committee meeting, there was Councillor Shaw said to Councillor Zakidniak, Shannon, can you please leave your lecturing to a personal conversation instead of wasting my time? So it was considered quite rude and not acceptable, I guess. And this, I think, it doesn't really, that article doesn't really go into a discussion about the other complaints about Councillor Shaw. She's said some pretty out there stuff, and she's been really reactionary in a lot of ways. And apparently, according to the second article that we have in related to this, is she has suffered a head injury or brain injury and has ADD, and that is the reason that she has impulse control issues when she's doing when she's speaking. And the article doesn't want to load for me right now for some reason, but I seem to recall in it there was something about how Councillor Shaw, like she said in the private sector, she never was judged by her first reaction. But now that she's in politics and in the public sphere, she's being judged by her first statement, the first thing that comes out of her mouth.
Do we know what private sector she worked in? Like, I'm
not sure.
Know how you're not judged in private sector.
In my job, I'm judged very quickly sometimes. Yeah.
And also, it's not just her first reaction. Like, she's been judged on things that she has thought about, written out, posted on social media, had people politely draw attention to ways in which it's problematic, double down on it, and then continue go. Like, at a certain point, that's not a gut reaction anymore. You've had plenty of time to think through your actions. When it came to issues around the conversion therapy ban and the questions she was asking, like, this was a known issue. It had multiple meetings, and it was a continued pattern of behavior. At some point, you run out of the ability to say, "Oh, my mental illness is causing me to blurt things out." That's not really blurting things out anymore.
Yeah, that was kind of my initial reaction. Was I was thinking about her Facebook posts that were problematic, and I'm going, well, I mean, I've posted some things quickly in the heat of the moment at times that you go, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't have posted that. But
absolutely,
then to double down on it, like there's multiple instances where she's had a chance to be more thoughtful and demonstrate a slower way of thinking, I guess. Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was known for being a little blunt and a little harsh with colleagues and things like that, and I worked on it, and I like to think I'm better now. But also when called on it, I don't say, well, I was just blah, 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 blah. And like, you don't make excuses for it. You don't explain why you're right and why the person who's hurt is wrong, right? You acknowledge that you're hurt, and you can say, I never meant any harm by it, like she's quoted in this article. But, it's not always the intent that matters. That's great. No harm was meant by it. But instead of, just fully actually apologizing for the hurt caused, it's like, it's because of this, it's because of that. It's like, if I'm the person that's hurt, it's like, I don't really care why it happened. I want to know that you actually are sorry for it. And isn't she the one that did the whole like racist thing, like with surrounding homelessness? Isn't this the same lady?
That's the same lady.
Yeah, this is.
If it was just some random person, but it's like, I feel like you've kind of had a lot of just trash opinions that I feel like you saying trash out of your mouth is maybe just part of who you are. So good on you for wanting to work on that. I hope that trickles down into some of your other thought processes around people that aren't exactly like you, maybe.
And this one specific case, this current case, to be honest, like, is pretty mild compared to the other stuff. Like, this one feels more in line with her defense. The saying like, "Oh, I just blurted things out." Like, I don't think I've ever met someone in my life who has not at some point in a meeting wanted to say to someone, "Could you please get on with it?" Right? Like, we've all been in that meeting where someone is saying things we disagree with and is dragging on the meeting, and sometimes we blurt things out and sometimes we keep it to ourselves. So like this one, like I said, I could probably give her a little bit of leeway. It was rude, like the comment she made to the fellow council member was rude, but I go back to, like, I think she probably would have been given a lot more grace if she hadn't demonstrated a history of being homophobic and racist, right? Like, it's that thing where, the person who has a consistent history of being a bigot accidentally slips up and says something inappropriate, you're a lot less likely to give them some leeway than the person who goes out of their way to be kind and be thoughtful and work on their own internal biases and then accidentally says the wrong thing sometimes. There's a different reaction to that. And it sometimes seems like, and again, we've talked about our own biases here, but it often feels like the political right sometimes misses the whole point about not judging people on superficial things, but judging them on the content of the character, and goes, I shouldn't be judged on the content of my character either. No one should ever be judged for anything, including their own words and actions. And at some point, we got to judge Terina Shaw for her words and her actions.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm guessing that there wouldn't have been a complaint filed if this was like the first, rude thing she said to a colleague, rude or disrespectful thing she said to a colleague, right? This was just like, this is like in writing on a, on a chat.
It's like catching Al Capone on tax evasion, right? Like, sure, he's murdered a whole bunch of people, but we'll put him to jail on tax evasion because that's the one we can prove. And I think we have a little bit of that with Terina Shaw. It's a history of being horrifically racist and homophobic. None of that, all of that skirted the line of what you can and can't do in council. But this one was a direct,
and isn't there
comment to a fellow council member?
Yeah, for the homelessness stuff, like the racist stuff, is there not some sort of investigation into that going on? It's still ongoing?
I think that's still ongoing, and the city council is trying to figure out what they can and can't do. The mayor has apologized for it, but Shaw herself has not.
Yeah. And that's what I mean, right? It's like, no, this is totally okay, and this is why. It's like, okay, but you've been told why it's not okay. Can you just, So it's like, okay, well, if you think that's okay, we now know what's in your heart, what's in your head. And that's what that's going to color everything else that you do. So when you do something like this or something else, it's like, well, I know that last time you're kind of a jerk about, being called out for being a racist. And instead of just saying, instead of copping to it and apologizing and learning from it, you're doubling down always and giving excuses and just trying to re-explain the point that you think you're trying to make instead of just accepting that you are wrong, right?
Yeah. So the medical assistance in dying option has been removed from the SHA's 811 healthcare menu because, according to the mental health minister, to some it might imply that suicide is an option. Anyone who called 811 healthcare line earlier this month had the option of selecting option 5 on the menu, which would connect them to the medical assistance in dying program, but that option is no longer available. And I mean, that seems like a good call to me. I don't know. I know that within various progressive circles, the MAID thing is controversial because often, like, the idea that we'll provide you the necessary tools to kill yourself, but we won't give you enough, money to live, to buy your medication, to do this, to do that. We won't support you in various ways, but you're allowed to die. And there has been cases, though I think they're quite rare in Canada, where people are making the choice to get the medical assistance in dying because they can't get the care they need or the support for their condition or disability or what have you. So,
yeah, I didn't know that it was even an option in 811. Like, I knew MAID existed. I don't think it necessarily needs to be, as long as it's pretty clear how to access it. Like, I'm pretty sure 811, number 7 isn't if you wish to access an abortion. Here's right. So it's like there's other controversial healthcare things that people need to know how to access and need to be able to access.
Yeah.
And this is in my opinion, is one of those things. As you said, there are problems with it, absolutely. But myself personally, if I am at a point where I do not want to be here anymore and I am suffering greatly, I absolutely want this option and I want to know how to get it. So having an 811 would have been handy, but I don't know that I would have thought, like, how do I get MAID? I'll call 811 and listen through the options. Maybe it's on there. Like, I don't think my head would have gone there as I would have spoken to my doctor or Googled something. So I don't think it's as big of a scandal that it was taken off of 811. I think the scandal is what's his face was stirring up shit, and that's why it got taken down. So it looks like they won. So I think that's problematic because, what's his face?
Maxime Bernier.
Yeah, that's the one.
So abortion is an option you can find out information on 811.
On 811?
Oh, is it? Okay.
I never make it past 1 or 2. It's like, is it for COVID or not for COVID? And that's as far as I go.
Yeah, no, I just took a quick look online for it. I'm certain it is for the Alberta 811. I'm pretty sure it is for the Saskatchewan one as well, from what I can tell. So I think it should still be in the 811 menu. Okay. I think, like, the idea that we are denying access to medical care because society isn't perfect yet is a bad reason to deny access to bodily autonomy. I don't. It's a medical service. It should be accessible to people who want it. The idea that, you're right, we shouldn't put people in a position where they're choosing it for economic reasons. We also shouldn't put people in a position where they're choosing abortion or a variety of medical conditions that are medical procedures because of economic conditions. Those are separate things. I think if there is a safe legal medical procedure, safe being a relative term when it comes to medically assisted dying, but like a legal medical procedure that follows, Health Canada guidelines and is following the law, it should be accessible.
And I think
and
that, sorry.
You
I
should
think
do the
the
things
issue
in
is that
society
they're
to
equating it
make it
with
so that it's not an
suicide.
economic decision.
Yeah.
Separate. Sorry, I interrupted Sarah. Go ahead.
No, I interrupted you first. So, I think that the issue here is that they're equating it with suicide and saying, like, having it there and saying, like, suicide is an option. It's like, MAID is not suicide. It is medical assistance in dying, and we need to stop equating the two. So I think that's kind of the big part of it. The people who are super against MAID or like any assistance in dying and just want people to suffer forever will just equate it to suicide, just like they equate abortion with killing babies and stuff like that. And it's like, it's not about that. Doesn't matter, even if that's what you believe it's about. It's my choice, what I want to do with my life. And absolutely, it shouldn't be because you just can't afford your medicine. It should be because you're making a free and informed choice. And even if you're thinking, oh, suicide is an option, 811 is not going to walk you through MAID to commit suicide. Like, they do know that, right? Like, they're not like, you know what, I just don't want to live anymore. There's no problem. I just am suicidal. No, they're going to find you other help for your suicidal ideation, not refer you to the MAID program. So equating those two is, wrong on many levels. If you are considering suicide and you're calling 811 and that's the option you pick, I'm certain you will be referred elsewhere to get the proper help that you need, right? So the thing about, it's promoting suicide, it's giving people suicide as an option. It's like, not suicide, and just because it's on 811 doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen, if they click that number, right?
Also, another great example of someone who wanders around talking about how they're such a big libertarian and then doesn't actually, put their money where their mouth is, right? Like, Bernier still continues to claim that he supports medical assistance in dying, but then uses opposition to it in order to drum up outrage, right? Like, it's you can't, it's giant hypocrisy, and I shouldn't be surprised by that.
I don't think that we can actually take much of what Maxime Bernier says at face value. He isn't a good faith actor in any sense. So
once again, it's just this thing about people claiming the title of libertarian, and then what they really just mean by that is conservatives who like pot.
Conservatives who don't want to pay taxes.
Cliche, but conservative who wants to cut taxes more than most conservatives and thinks you should smoke pot. Maybe a lot of them don't even think you should be allowed to do that either. So
that's right.
There's one sort of single issue where they feel that they like freedom more than conservatives do, but it's usually pretty inconsistent.
Yeah, that's right. Wastewater studies in 3 Saskatchewan cities show that COVID-19 levels continue to rise. The 4th highest numbers in Saskatoon since the study began. But this value is considered static compared with last week. A group of researchers from the U of S have analyzed wastewater samples from Saskatoon, North Battleford, and Prince Albert, and they found that the numbers are pretty high. So we're still got lots of COVID in the people and in the system, and it doesn't appear to be going away, despite not doing anything about it.
As a scientist, I'm shocked. Blown away by these results.
Yeah. I'm not sure exactly what to say about this, actually, except that, we're not doing anything, and the numbers go up.
Water is wet. Yeah.
Yeah. And absolutely nothing, and we're all out of options. Yeah, no, it's. I don't know if anyone can be surprised by this at this point. It's
not anyone who's paying attention. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just whether it will continue to increase as it gets colder, and now school's in and all of that. Still just kind of cuts off in early mid-September. So we'll likely only get, but at some point there's going to be a point in time where just like everybody has COVID, so we're not going to see an increase in COVID.
Yeah.
So, I guess That's something to look forward to.
I recently heard there's not very many people tracking stats about COVID anymore, but the number of deaths that we can currently attribute to COVID in Canada is somewhere around 45,000 apparently, which that's a lot of people in a country our size. That's a lot of people for one thing to have killed. It seems like maybe the way we handled things was probably not the best. I don't know, but I guess probably sound like a broken record saying that stuff. Everything is not fine. Overcapacity in ERs, creating longer ambulance wait times. And with some patients waiting up to 48 hours before a patient has gotten offloaded into the ER or into a bed. Some patients have waited so long that their symptoms have cleared up and the patient has been discharged without ever seeing the ER. And it's not, they do say in the article that it's not just because of COVID, but also because of a massive understaffing and underfunding of the healthcare system in Saskatchewan.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying, the part about it being indirectly, right? Like the fact that we have an underfunded and understaffed healthcare system is definitely linked to government cuts, but it's also linked to government mismanagement of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sarah, I interrupted you again. We're still getting the flow of having three different people.
Having spent a decent amount of time in ERs prior to the pandemic, it was already a long wait, depending on, triage, where you were triaged and things like that. And it, decently full. But from what I've heard of people who've had to go more recently, it's, standing room, like there's not enough chairs to sit in the waiting room. Like that article says, ambulance, all of that. Like when I was taking an ambulance, that's when I got in the fastest, because if you come in by ambulance, theoretically means you're, if something's pretty bad, that you're not walking in underground power. So you tend to get seen a little sooner. So if you're waiting that long after being brought by ambulance, that's kind of a big deal. And yes, it's maybe not all of these people have COVID, but I think the lack of staffing is, chronic underfunding for years. But then, all of us, not all of us, but, the government saying like, well, we're just going to not do anything about COVID anymore after these folks put in just exorbitant amount of hours. I can't imagine the mental workload or the mental anguish of having to work in the healthcare system during a pandemic. Like I had a hard time being a parent of, a 6-month-old, now 3 years old, trying to work, my husband trying to work, and everything through that was hard. I can't imagine being a healthcare worker and seeing people having rallies and occupying our capital because of COVID restriction, protections, not restrictions. That just breaks your soul, right? Like you already have a hard job. And I've heard from a lot of folks that, they're leaving in droves, either retiring early, finding a different career, moving to a different province, all of that. So, and they get sick themselves too, right? When COVID's running rampant and they're seeing patients constantly and they're out in the community and have kids in schools and daycares, well, they're going to be out with COVID as well. So, it's really not surprising. It's really sad, but it's not surprising. And I don't know what we do to fix it if under our current government, I don't.
Yeah.
Well, and you get chain reactions too, right? So you have situations where your most sought after specialists are leaving for places where they are treated better, which means people are having to go see their general practitioner more often because they can't get into the specialist yet. But then the general practitioner starts getting a backlog, so people aren't going to the general practitioner as often as they could to do preventative health and stay healthy, which means they then start going to emergency care for things that otherwise could have been caught earlier or dealt with at the general practitioner. And then your emergency care starts having a backlog and an overflow. So now we have EMTs in the hospitals providing care where they should be handing someone off, which means the EMTs are not out doing their EMT work, which means people stay injured longer and have longer wait times and longer response times for hospitals, which means by the time EMTs get to them, the reason for calling EMT in the first place has gotten worse, and it just snowballs, right? And then it just ripples throughout the entire system. And this is, I kind of go back to my somewhat trademark view on things, is even if you don't care about people, even if you want to take a cold-hearted, ruthless, looking at the dollars and cents bottom line view of it, it's a stupid way of doing healthcare because it's more expensive. You're spending money on EMTs working on people in the hospital, and then you're sending people to emergency where they could have gotten dealt with earlier. Like, you're spending tens of thousands of dollars, which all add up to literally millions upon millions of taxpayer dollars on things that could have been solved cheaper if you literally just staffed properly and treated the pandemic with respect right from the beginning, and treated it as a serious medical event that required focus and attention. And we're paying the price for it. So that was my big long rant and ramble. But it's so frustrating that you have all of these people who claim to be, quote unquote, fiscally responsible, who are literally throwing money away over a conservative ideology, or pretending that everything is fine when it isn't, refusing to admit things aren't fine, and not solving problems which make them worse.
Yep, I got nothing to add. All right, so SaskPower is providing an update on a proposed solar power plan project for Estevan. And the Estevan City Council members had a few questions about the proposed 100 megawatt project. Yeah, I mean, it's still a really good project. They did mention in here that they absolutely have to be careful because they don't want to imply that they're going to take away from the coal power. This is a whole separate thing. We're not stopping the burning of coal. We're just doing this as well. So, yeah. I don't know. I think a lot of that gets caught up in the idea that Saskatchewan people get really offended, I guess, when we're not burning things. We're not burning oil, or we're not burning coal, or we're not even burning, doing a nuclear burn. Like, we're just
campfire bans.
Yeah, that's right. People get really upset about campfire bans. We have to be able to burn things.
Yeah. And is that just indicative of our kind of lack of I'm from Saskatchewan, so I don't want to say we're all, cave folk, but we really like to do things that are not higher order human. Burn things and beat things, and if you don't look like me, you're awful, and if you don't believe the same, God as I do, you're off. Like, just all of that sort of thing is just very, I thought it was funny too that it's like, oh, solar, that's great. But it's like, but don't worry, we're not taking away your coal. Don't worry.
Like,
hey, well, why not then? I mean, I get you, maybe you just have more power needs, so you just need this on top of. Fine. But it's like, job losses associated with the end of coal-fired power will be huge for the community. So train and learn new things. Like, we could be a huge, green energy place here in Saskatchewan, right? Like, got nothing but space and wind and sun more than other provinces. Like, why? And uranium. Like, let's do some other stuff and be head of the class instead of, no, we're going to burn things and that's it. End of story, right? It's just strange.
The funny part of the article is sort of the end, where I don't know if they meant to position it in a way that sort of has it go in a circle, but it's this, we can't have this type of energy replace coal because coal is so important. And the reason coal is so important is that we don't have anything to replace it with. It's just like we're slated to phase out conventional coal-fired power plants by 2030, but we can't do that because there's nothing to replace coal with. And because coal is so important, we can't bring in this electrical stuff because coal is so important. So we can't do that because then we'd lose coal, and we don't have anything to replace coal with, so we can't replace coal. And it's like, do you know? Read what you're writing or see what you're saying. All right.
Yeah.
I love the I also really love the emphasis, like the mayor's like, we're doing this in our leisure center, which has a really big room that we can do this in with, which is like so small town Saskatchewan mayor being like, hey, check out our great facility. We're doing this. I just love that.
Then hopefully this becomes a good news story. Like I honestly do hope that as the green energy projects do start to take hold and people see the economic benefits from it, and more people are seeing their neighbors go to work, that it becomes a positive enough of an impact that it overcomes sort of the my team versus your team when it comes to fossil fuels.
Yeah, for sure. I or is it going to be one of these things where now the people who work at the solar facility are going to have to, they're the enemy, so we have to dislike all the solar power guys?
I hope not. I think, yeah, there definitely is an element of politics that seems even more so than it did in the past, and maybe that's just privileged perspective on it, where people are again picking their political beliefs not because they align with the beliefs, but because that's what their team has decided. And the Sask Party team has decided green energy bad. So I worry that will take root more than it should.
Yeah.
On the flip side, like, again, people sometimes complain we don't give the other perspective. I also have concerns that one of the things political polarization does is people who agree with me, and myself included in this, when there are projects or plans or prospective things that aren't good, that don't go wrong or don't go correctly, we hold on to them more tightly than we should because we can't see, we don't want to have the sort of the bad press of a green energy project not work. And there are going to be some, there are going to be some of these projects that at some point become bad projects. We saw lots of hydroelectric projects 20, 30 years ago that were bad projects that were not cost efficient. We're going to have other ones when it comes to green energy, and we need to make sure that we continue to monitor our own biases on those as well, so that we don't hold on to the bad ones just because we're worried about the losing of the good ones.
Close to my home. There was a report of a gun inside a school prompted F.W. Johnson Collegiate into a lockdown. It ended safely, but there were 6 other schools also placed under the Secure the Building protocol. So, yeah, this is like just down the street from me. If something happens, I love you, the grade 10 student had texted her father, noting her and her classmates were locked in their classroom with the door barricaded. Like, this is the stuff you hear out of the United States. You worry about school shootings, these things. It was the girl was arrested away from the school in another area, and it was an airsoft gun resembling an assault rifle. So, yeah, I guess not a real threat, but it seems threatening and is scary to everyone, especially with all the press we hear about school shootings in the U.S. Oh, you're muted.
You still had your class go on lockdown and everybody fearing for their life. So
yeah,
that's what she was wanting to do, was scare everybody. She succeeded, right?
Yep.
But yeah,
I guess
very close to home. I grew up around there too. So
yeah.
My son's in grade 9 at Campbell, which is 3 blocks away or 4 blocks away or however many it is. So it's
right.
I drive by Johnson every day after dropping him off.
Yeah,
it's close to home.
Yeah, for sure. We like Sir graduated from FW Johnson. That was the school he went to. They have in the past had the odd incident with a knife or something where they've had to like lock down the school, but this is the first that I can recall that where it was thought that there was an assault rifle in the school. Like it's pretty extreme.
I remember talking to someone recently about the idea of lockdown drills, and like they were surprised to hear that the kids have them here. That was, and then we don't talk about it quite in the same way, but we do have lockdown drills in Canada, and it's that thing where I've talked about it before too, where it's our proximity to the US. I think sometimes taints our view on stuff because we can compare ourselves to them and go, "Oh, we're doing great."
Yeah.
But as soon as you remove them from the mix, all of a sudden, when you compare Canada to other sort of high-income OECD nations, we're back to being like, we're not doing so great when it comes to the safety of our schools and gun violence and guns in general, right? So, like, obviously, light years ahead of where the US is, but that doesn't mean it's good enough. And again,
as with all things,
when it happened, yeah.
If you put the bar on the floor, you can step over it pretty easily.
Yeah.
The U.S. is not a good
and
thing
with
to
so many things.
To.
Yeah, and with so many things, trying to argue better in a way that doesn't diminish it not being good enough, but also trying to argue it not being good enough without diminishing the fact that it's better, right? Like having to try and have that nuanced view of things, in a world where people really want to think it's one or the other, right?
Yeah.
It's where people really want to try and argue, no, it's great here, or try and argue, no, it's just as bad.
Can we just talk about the fact that someone was quoted as using the word shitty, and I don't think I've ever seen that in a Leader Post article.
Like, I didn't even notice it when reading it. So.
Me either. Yeah.
It's shitty.
Just blended in nowadays.
I was like, I have no problem with swearing, but it was just like, I read it without thinking, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not like reading a Facebook post, I'm reading an actual news article.
Yeah.
And they didn't like make the I into something else, or, it's expletive
was
deleted.
It
no, just it's shitty.
It's shitty.
I hope swearing's okay on here, because
no.
Oh yeah, if swearing wasn't okay on here, we would have ended this 51 episodes ago.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm in the right place. Oh, but then, like, the next sentence down, they couldn't say fucking.
Shitty's okay. Shitty's
okay.
K-I-N.
F dash. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Anyways.
Yeah. Saskatchewan is still recording no deaths related to the COVID vaccine. COVID vaccination rates may have slowed dramatically in Saskatchewan, but many are still rolling up their sleeves to receive a booster. And since the start of the pandemic and the introductions of the COVID-19 vaccines in the province, more than 80% of Sask residents over the age of 12 have received 2 doses. At 45% of the population has received at least 3. And there are no recorded deaths based on the vaccine. It's almost like it's not a deadly secret virus that they're injecting into people just to, make them sick and influence. Oh yeah. And institute the Great Reset, right?
No, Cory, all of the deaths are being hidden. There's a great province-wide conspiracy where every single doctor in the province is in on it and hiding the true numbers.
Which is like kind of funny in a way, because Saskatchewan is actually not reporting deaths. We're very behind in reporting deaths. So there's Tara Moriarty that does all of the stats for the different provinces, and she looks at excess deaths, so not just like COVID, because again, we're not recording things properly. Yeah. So just looking at excess deaths. And like every single time, it's like in Saskatchewan, who is, months behind, they're still reporting some deaths from 2020. So we are hiding a lot of deaths, but I don't think it's for the reason they're saying. I think it's we just don't have the infrastructure to administrate things as quickly, and B, it makes it not look as bad if, we don't have that many excess deaths, but we do. And I think quite a bit higher than the Canadian average. I haven't looked at the stats in a while, but yeah. So it's kind of funny. Deaths are being hidden, but
not due to the vaccine.
Vaccine-related deaths, just more likely they're COVID deaths, or I couldn't get my cancer surgery in time, or my heart surgery, or whatever else, because the healthcare system was overwhelmed, etc., etc.
So I guess there have been 8 deaths reported within 30 days of receiving a dose of the vaccine. There have investigations into 4 of those cases were inconclusive. 3 incidents were deemed not attributable to the vaccine, and 1 could not be determined as VITT. Yeah, and this month, several posts on social media indicated a woman died minutes after receiving a booster shot at a pharmacy in Saskatchewan.
It was not
and it then goes on to say that was investigated and found to be natural causes. And again, if we do want to try and take into account possibilities, I don't know what natural causes means. Was it she was nervous and stressed that caused a spike in anxiety levels and led to heart complications or something like that? I don't know. Like, we don't know what natural causes mean, so there could be something related to that. The stress of getting the vaccine. But even if we assume all 4 of the ones that were inconclusive are directly related to the vaccine, or even indirectly related to the vaccine, that is still a incredibly low mortality rate for any medical intervention. So
I love how people just think that all medicine has to be 100% safe, right? Like,
or even that it is.
People
right?
die from taking Tylenol, right? Like Tylenol can be very bad if you have any sort of liver issue, right? Well, that's available over the counter. You can pop as many as you want. And I did a talk years ago actually about risk perception and how we kind of suck at it. And I did, one scary thing and some not scary thing, and said, like, what are your odds of dying from this? And in the age range of like the 20s to 50s, folks were not dying of heart disease, cancer, all of that. It's, accidental deaths would be car accidents, things like that. And accidental poisoning, which is not intentional poisoning. It's not somebody like trying to kill me, but overdose of, we hurt our back in college football, so now we are popping pain pills all the time. And it can be over-the-counter stuff. It could be anything. Or I got cholesterol, so I'm taking my cholesterol meds, and that doesn't mix well with the cold meds I take, whatever the case may be. That's kind of one of the top 5 causes of death. And people don't realize that. Nobody but me reads the package insert on, your over-the-counter medicine for the proper dosing and all of that. And I'm like, when I'm sick and I need like Advil and Tylenol, I like write it down in my phone when I took it, because I can't remember if it's been 6 to 8 hours, and if I've taken 5 in a day in a 24-hour period. So I write that shit down because that's just who I am. But like, people die from that. But they think that this vaccine, one person dying from it means that it's terrible. It's like, there would be no medicines on the shelves or available at the pharmacy at all if that was the bar that you set, right?
Zero risk.
We'd have no toothpaste. There have been people die from toothpaste. We would have no toothpaste. Like, as far as like, that is the level to which we are dealing with if we're trying to have 100%. But 45,000 deaths gets brushed aside.
It's just a flu.
We talked about that similarly on last episode, but when it was in relationship to the violence, the stabbings that we had, we're talking about, and it's when it comes to risk assessment, it's people almost always will overestimate the risk from an acute risk and will almost always downplay the risk from a chronic risk, right? Like, it's people want to see this big risk of a one-time event and that's going to be blown out of proportion. But if it's something that's an ongoing chronic risk, just that gets brushed aside. And to some degree, in a lot of things, we have to do that in order to not be paralyzed by fear in our daily life, right? The risk inherent in driving a car is relatively high, but we can't function in day-to-day life if we're constantly worried about it. So I get why our brains do the things they do, but it definitely adds to us being really, really lousy at measuring, especially when comparing one issue that's chronic and one issue that's acute.
Yeah, 100%.
Lutheran Church launching investigation of Sask pastor accused of anonymously harassing a woman online. Reverend Todd Guggenamos, I don't know, has been placed on leave during independent review. The Twitter account, not Tammy R, is a now deleted account, only available if you go through the Wayback Machine, which some people have done, and there have been screenshots. That account was harassing Tammy Roberts, who is a relatively well-known blogger and a favorite target of John Gormley. And it was quite consistent harassment and pretty awful things said and posted, including there's a screenshot of a tweet alleged to have come from the account, which condones sexual relationship between adults and minors. People who are defending Reverend Todd they claim that screenshot is photoshopped, but their arguments seem pretty flimsy to me. That's kind of the background on this.
Well, interesting that he denies that tweet, but not everything else, right?
Yeah.
So that just right there. And again, I have been following this a bit on Twitter, but I'm not, as in the know as some are. But even just saying that is that no, I don't condone that stuff. By not denying the other stuff, you're saying that it is fine to harass women online in a way. Like, I don't have that much of a problem with it that I have to try and distance myself from that.
This is the tweet that I want.
I don't want people to think I'm a pedophile, right?
Right. Yeah.
Which, good. You don't want people to think you're a pedophile. If you're not a pedophile, that's good. You don't want people thinking you're a pedophile. But if you know you're also being accused of, harassing women online, you'd think you'd be saying that one too. And yeah, it's funny, not funny that it's a pastor, because of course it is. Like, we're shocked.
Yeah, there was quite a few people on Twitter who were like, I can't believe he's a pastor. I'm like, I don't know. That says the brand fits.
Yeah, it's kind of on brand.
The one thing I will say,
instead of Catholic,
I'm no big fan of any church. Good on the Lutheran Church for putting him on leave right away, investigating it, like taking it seriously. Like that is a positive step. I think when you look at the many church scandals of the past, I know many fellow atheists who will try and make the argument that it is being part of the church or being in the clergy that inherently makes people do these horrific, awful things. I would argue there may be something within the doctrine that could lead to that, or you can speak to about vows of celibacy and all that. But I would argue that probably the biggest reason why you see it prevalent within the Catholic Church was the power imbalance. It's the same reason why you see it in hockey coaches and other places where you have people in authority who don't get questioned and don't get held accountable. Anytime you have a large structure, a large organization with no accountability for leadership, you can get away with shit. And the fact that the Lutheran Church, in this case at least, seems to be having an interest in accountability is a positive thing. So I will end the story on at least a somewhat positive aspect to it.
There was, again,
it's shitty that it happened. But.
Yeah, from following on Twitter, there was a lot of people tweeting at the Lutheran Canada Church saying to do exactly that. So you can't say whether it was on their own, or them thinking it was because they showed it as the right thing to do. But hey, it's not the Catholic Church. They didn't just ship them off to some other
Exactly.
parish in a different country with people who would be even less likely to report abuse and harassment. So that's good. And yeah, I'm glad that it is
Bar's on the floor, but
reviewer.
The bar is on the floor.
The bar is on the floor. I'm acknowledging that.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
it'll be
John
interesting.
Gormley still has a job, and he's done just as bad stuff. So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's very much our province, right? Like, I feel for these women. I don't know them personally or anything, but having just been a tiny sliver of, the hate that women especially see online, I can't imagine, right? Like I keep a pretty low profile and don't have a ton of followers and don't do anything too controversial to, bring out the trolls, but there has been a bit here and there. And yeah, I can't imagine being the focused target of someone like Gormley or any his rabid followers would be terrifying. Like, ooh.
Oddly enough, it happens to happens to quite a few women who are progressive in Saskatchewan.
You say oddly enough, or
oddly enough.
Yeah,
I sense a hint of sarcasm in that oddly. Yeah,
sarcastically oddly. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's all we have for tonight. So you can find us at anchor.fm/frommanypeoples. Our Twitter is at skpoliticspod. You can find us at facebook.com/frommanypeoplesstrengthpod. The show notes will be on skepticalleftist.com. And you can email us at frommanypeoples@gmail.com or send us enough money for a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/frommanypeoples. Thank you, Sarah and David, for joining me tonight.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Cory. And thank you, Sarah, for joining us. I'm very excited to have you on the show.
Okay.
That is great.
Good.
Definitely the show, it will benefit from an added perspective that's not just Cory and I sort of rehashing some of our points that we've had a few times, repeated ourselves or twice over the years now. So it is very great to have you here. I won't be here next time, so the two of you get to hold down the fort when I'm gone. So I'm excited I don't listen to podcasts, and one of the ongoing things I've talked about is I'm doing a podcast and I just don't listen to them, but I think I will make an exception to listen to the one that happens while I'm gone. So
right on. All right.